Hello everyone and welcome to this week's video. This week I'm going to be doing a trend that I saw on both Instagram and on Twitter where you take your current art style and do the opposite of it. Basically taking what you would normally be known for and doing the complete opposite. If you're new to my channel, hello, welcome. I mainly do very detailed fantasy based art. Lots of line work. I tend to draw like creatures, animals, D&D fantasy based settings, so I tend to have a slight vary with my really cute creatures and my sort of semi-anime fantasy based art. But one thing is always very consistent with this, and that is line art. So a big challenge for me would be to do something completely lineless. Another thought was that I could do realism, but I kind of felt like doing something just simply lineless would be really good to branch out and try something a little bit out of my comfort zone. So in discussions with my Discord, we came up with a few settings that I could work with. One was simplified, so not heavily detailed. Although this piece does have a fair amount of detail in it, it's heavily simplified in what I would normally do, going for an urbanized setting instead of a sort of foresty nature based setting, because I tend to do a lot of things with nature and tend to avoid sort of urban side settings. Lots of really bright bold colours, because I tend to stick with muted tones even though they can be quite bright. I tend to stick with very similar colour palettes and I tend to have like my set colour palettes that I always go for. I go for very earthy tones a lot, so to go with something very bright and very neon would be complete opposite of what I was going to do. So I tried to do a quick mock-up of what I wanted after doing a few sketches. This was sort of like a finalized mock-up, and originally I was going to do this with highlighters. However, that wasn't going to get the flat style that I was after. So in the end, I decided that I was going to use Posca pens. Posca pens are really good if you want to get a flat finish on an illustration. This is really good if you want to do flat style illustration in no line work at all, or lineless illustration. Now, I have done lineless art in the past digitally. It was something that I did at university. It is more of a commercialized style, I would say, for me. So I kind of, in a way, it is something that I have done, but I've never done it traditionally. So my first thought was, when I was going to be doing this, was okay, I tend to do a lot of traditional art, maybe the opposite for me would be to go digital. But I thought it would be best to try my skills in doing a style like this traditionally, since I have done it digitally in the past. I'm talking something like 10 years ago now. It would be a challenge for me to try and replicate this style traditionally. So Posca pens really give me that flat finish that I'm after. I've got a few. This is Posca pens and Thule art pens. I'm going to be doing a review on acrylic markers in the future and let people know whether or not I like them, but that's for another video. Let me know in the comment section if this is something that you would be interested in, simply because I know a lot of artists use Posca pens. I tend to use them when I'm going to be working on canvas, or if I know that I'm going to be working on unconventional materials, because they're really good for working on unconventional materials. Thule art pens are another acrylic pen that I have used several times before. I used them in my Switch customization video, also used them in a few other videos as well. Now, one thing that I tend to be known for is mixed media styling. I tend to mix a lot of textures to get the shading desired that I'm after. So my whole idea here was, if I had shading, it would be extremely minimal. I am talking next to no shading. This was extremely difficult for me. Now, for some people, lineless may be completely their style and something that they are used to, but to go from having to use a lot of heavy shading to create the textures that I want, because I use mixed media, and trying to stick to one medium was extremely difficult for me. And you will see later on, I tried to do something and it didn't work, so I rectified that. So the whole point of this was to try and use very simple shapes to try and get the style that I'm after. This is the lineless style that I'm talking about. Very minimalistic. There is no detailing in the line work. There is no line work at all in this, which was possibly the most difficult thing for me. I know to some people this is not a challenge. Some people have lots of different styles that they use, and that is absolutely fantastic. You should have an array of styles that you use for different commercialized work. This is because it's better for client work in particular, especially as an illustrator. You can have a style, but it's good to have that variation in style. Now, my variation in style is that I have my children's style illustration, and then I have my very heavy based fantasy based illustration, but there is definitely room to grow. And this, to be honest, after doing this once, I could be doing stuff like this in the future. It was once I got the hang of it, I started to enjoy it. But the thing that was most difficult for me was to not try and add a lot of detail. I wanted to go in, I wanted to add texture, I wanted to add so much more to this piece and really get it the way I wanted. But that was very difficult to not go in and doing that. Keeping to myself, okay, we need to use simple colours, simple shapes, and not go too crazy with shading, because that would be the complete opposite of what I'm trying to replicate here. I think what's interesting is when we try to push ourselves outside of our boundaries, we come to learn a lot of stuff that we like and dislike. I actually really like this illustration. It was really difficult for me, but overall I'm really happy with how it came out. I love the colour palette that was chosen. It's not as brightly coloured as I should have gone. I should have gone a lot more neon in the palette, but in the end it was a really soft, colourful palette, which I'm really happy with. There is things that I would go back and improve on. I would definitely use a ruler to get those lines straight in certain areas, in particular with the buildings. When it comes to like the windows, some of the windows are so wonky, but you know, I was trying to do something and replicate a very different style than I was normally go for. But you know, you try out different things and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. As I was going through, I definitely thought I should have used a smaller piece of paper. There is good size and bad size to using Poscas. The good side is that you do get a really nice flat colour if you use them correctly, and it can turn out very nice overall. The downside is sometimes you can't get a lot of deep colours with Poscas, and this is where here I was trying to replicate a texture that I kind of wanted in the background, suddenly realising after a bit that it just didn't fit in with the rest of the illustration, because if I was going to have texture on the background, I needed to have texture elsewhere to tie that in. And since we're trying to do something opposite to what we would normally do, it just didn't work. So I went back over with the Posca pens, realised I didn't like the entire yellow background, and went in with some purple to tie in the rest of the purple that's in the illustration. Going out of our comfort zones can be extremely difficult at times, because you are forcing yourself to do something that you wouldn't normally do, and it can be quite scary when things don't turn out the way that you want it to. And it was at this point in this illustration where I was like, I hate this. I like the end result. There's definitely things that can be improved with the end result, but at this point, at this time, I disliked this image so much. I disliked the color palette, I disliked everything about it, and it was perfectly understandable because I was stepping so far out of my comfort zone that it was a big change for me. But everyone has a happy zone that they tend to fit in. For me, I like really rounded shapes. I tend to stick away from urbanized settings because I like more natural settings. I enjoy drawing all the plants, but anything with like a lot of like sharp and technical points I tend to avoid a lot, because it just never looks right in my eyes. And That is something that I want to tackle personally, because I know that I need to improve on that section. It's coming to understand as an artist where your weaknesses lie and trying to improve on them. And sometimes a style change can really help an artist grow. There has been instances where people even here on this platform up on YouTube have completely changed their style because it just wasn't working for them. It's like when I stopped doing digital art for a while, because even though I was really happy with my digital skill and I was really proud of what I was producing, it just wasn't turning out the way I wanted it to. It felt too stiff and unnatural, and as much as I look back on those digital illustrations and go, I really still like this today, I can see where the cracks were starting to show, because everything was starting to look same old. And I could say that of some of the stuff that I do today. I really need to work on more detailed background things, and I do a lot of that stuff for the colouring books, but it doesn't translate to prints. It doesn't translate to other art. Like, a lot of planning goes into big illustrations, and sometimes you just don't have the time for big illustrations. So sometimes something a little bit more simple can be, a little bit easier on the palette, if that makes any sense. It's a lot better to manage. Every artist has their comfort zones, and it's very difficult to step out of those, but it's good. I highly recommend it. This is a challenge I would let and tell anyone to do. Take your current art style and try and do the opposite, and it's not going to turn out perfect. I'm going to tell you this now. Your first attempt probably is going to turn out absolutely awful, and that is completely okay, because you're doing something different than what you've trained yourself to do. You're doing something outside of your zone. It's to be expected. So don't be disheartened when you're trying something new, because it does get better. If you keep on trying with something that you're not very good at, you do improve. And that's definitely from someone from me who used to completely avoid doing backgrounds altogether, and now 90% of my artwork has backgrounds, which is kind of crazy because I used to absolutely hate doing them. But sometimes tackling things that are outside of your comfort zone really work for you, and I really do recommend it. It's good, it really is. So we're coming up to the end of doing this now, and like I said, there's parts of this illustration I really like. I was really happy once I started adding like really tiny lines to the illustration, especially on the foreground with the character in the foreground, because it just added that little bit of, since I wasn't doing line work, just added that little bit of texture. And here it is overall. Not overall hugely successful, but I had fun. And for those who probably are new to my channel, this is what my style always looks like. Very detailed line work with lots of nature and fantasy based things. So how do you think I did? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think I did alright? Was it successful? What do you think I could improve on for next time? I really hope you have enjoyed this video, and remember, stepping outside of your comfort zone is an excellent thing to do. And here is some of your amazing artwork that you have tagged me in, both on Instagram and on Twitter. Keep up the amazing work. It is so good to see you all drawing and creating, and I'm excited for Witchtober, which I've just created a prompt list for, which I'll talk about in next week's video. Hope you all have a wonderful week. See you next Thursday, and as always folks, stay creative.